On a Sunday we arrived. Even with our eyes shut, the closeness to the destination could be easily anticipated. The FM transmission shuffled between the signal of a voice and a bank of static that seemed manufactured by the forest as a whole. Sounds shapeshifted, sliding lubriciously as noise before suddenly precipitating into form as police sirens, weather forecasts, truck dealer promos, no down payments, and coke that tastes like cherry. Along the road, some scattered cottages appeared, some even with goats, horizontal pupils and all. Last time we were here, we had the same thing for supper, grease on top of grease, with sausages and the starch from a potato. The car was left down in the valley, marked with a downward pointing arrow on the cell phone. The arrow moved slightly, as if the car struggled to exist, strobing its own materiality. Flashlight, drones, and cameras with some camping equipment we carried onward. As we walked uphill, the forest felt thicker and fuller, as if the altitude allowed it to articulate itself better. Treetop clearings imbibed a liquid sense of time to the scene, giving way to the experience of traversing time zones of darkness and light, desynchronized from whatever the wristwatch insisted on. Near the river at the clearing, someone appeared. He squatted, cigarette in hand, looking over his right shoulder, satisfied. He stood still for a long moment and then seemed to relax briefly, never touching his cigarette again. As we passed him, an awkward urge to apologize arose as we disturbed the picturesque with our presence. Nearing the night, Josh's flash dumped its charge, a vast distance from me as I was trailing behind him. Blinded missteps took place that twisted my ankle. Pain shot upwards as it escaped my mouth in a scream as I fell, purple haze. At his suggestion, we made camp right there and then, him pointing at my ankle, quickly becoming a bulbous, purple, painful thing. Fairly accommodated at the tent, I could listen to him smashing, gathering, and bundling wood for a fire. Moisture trapped inside the wood made the fire crackle amberts towards the sky as a stream of orange glow. Engulfed they'd seem at moments as if inhaled from above. Taiga tundra mountain range, cliff coast glacier, polar regions of the earth, shrubland forest, rainforest, woodland, jungle, steppe and valley became the materialized reality surrounding us. As the wood burned, these different landscapes appeared in succession in the sky, scrolled and borealic, on top of the undulating sheets of smoke. The next morning I woke up sweating a fever, frail and achy, and I stepped outside with my camera and took no images. So hi, we'll continue with this little series of videos that I'm making. So this time we're going to talk about the Nullz series. So again, this is a continuing exercise regarding me always utilizing a starting point again, right? Like in that last series, in the end of facts, I'm using another scanned page. Now it's from Penthouse magazine from August 1980. It's page 169, and it contained a Salem cigarettes advertisement. So this time I scanned this image and made 28 variations of of landscapes. All I did was just to remove all the remnants of the advert, and try to only leave behind the image. I also deleted the subject because we have a subject in this case, and also the photograph of the product itself. And so continuing my research about the relationship between media and subjectivity and cognition and affection. So if you want to describe it succinctly, maybe it's about this notion of cognitive capture, or like psychoaffective capture by the overwhelming narrations that are just sent our way through in digital media. So I like to think about having this inner richness that's being occupied now by like exo narratives, narratives outside of ourselves, and how that informs our inner landscape, and also produces specific brands of emotionality. So it's very interesting to me to be able to make an image that looks so innocent looking. I mean, it's up to you if you consider them beautiful, but I do. I love their deep textural richness. They look very analog. They almost feel like silk screened or made with like a colored pencils. But of course, I am very fond of the difficulty of, instead of just grabbing the colored pencils and making the drawing, to take this very strange and peculiar, long and winding road to that somehow guarantees a peculiar aesthetic result. If you look at them thoroughly, you'll see little pieces of typography still in them that is somehow occupying the surface of the drawing itself. Also the idea of looking back at art history and just taking on such a sincere and simple genre, such as drawing. It's very democratic and very accessible. And so we have these landscapes which have this innocence to them, but at the same time they carry within themselves a darker undertone just by the fact of their origins. And some people have told me, like, wow, I mean, this is a victory because you are deleting a commercial message, and somehow in a strange alchemical process you're bringing forth something different that salvages or recovers beauty. And that's a beautiful and very generous reading. But I'm also interested in the opposite lecture, which is actually, and that advertisement is still there. It's just way more subtle. It's just we are having a more difficult time trying to pin it down, to point at it with our finger. So that's also fascinating. And it's again 28 variations. I was thinking deeply in photographic terms when I was making them. So you could say that it's like a typology of photographs with quotes, that are taken more or less from the same perspective, at different times of day. So I also like that idea of like the passing of time, and to actually render a notion of weather as part of this landscape or ecosystem that is somehow surrounding us. And it's inescapable in a way, right? Because it has this agoraphobic dimension, right? in which no matter how hard we try to escape it or to run away from it, or let's say to outrun weather, well, it pretty much catches up with us. So this time I used like 80% of the times only that Salem advertisement, but for certain effects like the clouds, I just took some pixels from a Jaguar advert, and there's only a couple of them that use a little more detailed scene of a forest with a couple of horses that I took from a Marlboro ad. And yeah, so the photographic tropes are everywhere, beginning with the, for instance, the one that is just the clouds almost looking down into the valley, which is looking down drone, which is pretty evident, I think so, and by the way, it has all this like shocky sensation to it, almost like a weird, pastel-like feel that I also love. It's almost like a fight against digital asepsis, or cleanliness, that I love to challenge and make it richer. So yeah, well, I've gone. You've heard the little statement I made for this series, which is honestly, to me, it's all there, but it's a little bit poetically coded. But all I'm doing with that little story is just trying to picture these two people traversing the advert itself, and looking for a place to camp inside their own mediatics. Symbolic space. So I'm just, it makes me smile that the moment he has an accident, it's because an actual flash somehow went off and just blinded him completely, and that the notion of the purple haze blindness, and then how he twists his ankle and just falls to the floor, and somehow forces them to make camp, and the moment where they actually walk through the subject in the ad himself, so, and they almost have an intuitive notion that there's something going on, because they describe something that look almost picturesque, and how he also barely touched his cigarette, so it's just clearly pointing at the fact that he was a model and he was just posing for the photograph. On the first paragraph, also this idea of, like, as they're approaching the forest, FM transmission just comes and goes, and there's also this beautiful notion, of something ghostly being captured, in this case by the antennas, that sends messages and somehow tries to convince us as the audience of developing a certain kind of attitude, for instance, buying a product, but then also how this emergent property is also present as the FM signal becomes just pure noise, and almost like a struggle between, like, the broadcasting station and the forest itself. So, it's just I'm just trying to point at that notion of something becoming material and immaterial, which is a topic that actually persists on my next collection, the Salt Saliva Metal series. So I don't know if this has happened to any of you, but it has happened to me that if you go to a complex parking lot and you leave a little pointer, right, a little marker in your telephone to that helps you remind where you left your car. Sometimes that little arrow, sometimes it's as if it's breathing at times. It's moving. It moves slightly. It's so. Again, this vehicle somehow strobing its existence or materiality, as if it was appearing and disappearing, and the arrow was struggling to keep pace. So that's also, the notion about about the little paragraph I made, and well, apparently it was cold and humid, so they're forced to make camp, and so one of them is listening at the other gathering wood, and so he makes a fire, and as the fire happens, this hallucination takes place where, like almost in a borealic manner, all the possible landscapes that exist just become manifest in the sky, almost like a fireworks exhibition. And so I was just thinking about scrolling through, for instance, Twitter, right? Just scrolling through it, and again, depending on the decisions you've made regarding who to follow and what to like, this landscape will be very specific. There's even a saying, right, that you have a art Twitter or politics Twitter or vegan Twitter or whatever brand of Twitter you're interested in. So again, those these notions of our intimate, most inner version, of our self and the stories we tell, and how they interface and how they are affected by, at the moment, a screen sends us information. So again, there's a little bit of a protest also in the last sentence, where I just, of course, not the hallucination. So I woke up with a fever and achy, and I stepped outside and took no photographs. It's almost as if the photograph wasn't apt enough to describe all of these nightmares and dreams. So I hope you enjoy it. As I said before, it's all there's a lot of things, a lot of little gestures inside that narration. And well, in also in a well, if you allow me, in a slightly serious manner, the idea of making a series of landscapes or variations on a landscape scene without going outside and without utilizing an actual easel or enjoying any sort of natural view is also poignant and interesting. And it's like a landscape of poverty in a way, because it's who on their right mind would attempt to make a landscape just from a magazine page. There's a sense of lack and a sense of mourning that also informs the work, like a renunciation of nature as a certain kind of luxury almost. So, and also, again, and at the same time, because this is full of contradictions, it's just filled with shadow and light. Again, and also the triumph, right, of just taking something as humble as a printed page and making a story, and making the 28 variations through different times of day and weather changes, and there's definitely a victory also of imagination, if I say it simply, and also a almost childish approach that has some beauty to it, I believe. And honestly, much of the substance of the work lies in the emotion I'm trying to describe, that I hope the work arises in you too. And of course, there's a limit to how much you can talk about an artwork, because in the end, the more direct way of interfacing with it is just the experience of the artwork itself. But if you are the kind of people who are interested in just having a little bit more context and me somehow pointing at a clearer path, to approach the work well. I mean, that's the reason I'm making this material. But so yeah, also the associations that are here also have to do with these notions of the end of facts, like encountering an other with capital letters, and somehow that other is able to dislocate and just reconfigure our inner meaning construction with a different perspective or a different story, and how then our this symbolic landscape changes violently, so maybe again suddenly you get a clearing, suddenly you have a storm or lightning at the distance. So all of these little uh, games and relationships, between the stabilizing effect of the stories we tell ourselves, but at the same time their deep fragility and how they're always susceptible to be deeply modified and transformed by the integration of new narrative stances. So well, I hope you enjoy this second video. Please let me know in the comments if you want me to touch upon something else. And I just remembered why some of that pieces have more visible residues of the advert, like in the jaguar word. And I was just thinking, like, maybe one of the characters was walking and had a his keys, just like jangling on the inside of his pocket, and his mind instantly went there to think about his car. And so now the landscape is very obviously tainted by two different notions of the real, one that is witnessed and the other that is imagined, and they're all occurring inside of his own cognitive space. So that's why. And yeah, I also, one last thing, it's just incredible how slowly the society is shifting from a material space to a society that is becoming just a semiotical one. It's all about discourse and banners and emblems and symbols and signs. It's just really interesting to see, and I call that just like the dematerialization of the social, and how that has a bigger and bigger weight in how we exist and how we make judgments about the other, or assessments of any kind. It's a more disembodied tendency lately. And so that's like, in the end, I think the deeper issue that I'm trying to be inspired by. That's the series. And well, the Nullz, of course, points at us, as human beings, as subjectivities, as citizens, that we're nullified by the weight of an incredibly noisy and pervasive ecosphere that drowns us. I think one of the most telling difficulties of our time is to listen to ourselves in all this, vertigo of information and digital
non-digitally mediated interactions with others, and in the end, to some extent, with ourselves too. So yeah, so that's my take on drawing and my take on the landscape genre. So I hope you enjoy this. Thank you very much, and I'll see you soon with a different clip.